time. For Steve? Hi, Michael. All right, we're going to get started. Okay, so the rapid interconnection of IBRs to the grid poses high risks to BPS reliability. Frank and Kelly, they both present on some of those risks in their presentations. We have two presenters from NERC. We have Steve Macy, the principal engineer in registrations, and Jamie Caldron, director of standards. They will continue this discussion talking about IBR registrations and reliability standards.
All right. Good afternoon. As Jimmy said, my name is Steve Massey. I'm a principal engineer at NERC. Thank you for inviting me to come. Not something I normally do, so it's kind of fun, a little scary, but I think we'll get through it. Just tell you a little bit about where I come from. So I'm from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, birthplace of America and Dunkin' Donuts. So, which was very important to get through college, I will say. Some people say I have a Boston accent. I'm not sure about that. I actually grew up in Rhode Island, which is a little confusing because it's not actually an island, but it is a state. It's one of the original 13 states. So there you go. Now, I was actually born in a small city called Woonsocket, Rhode Island. Has anybody ever heard of that? You have. There you go. All right. So Woonsocket's claim to fame is the home of what? CVS. Right? Did you know that? Maybe you didn't. So, all right, you can't answer this question. So who knows the capital of Rhode Island? Does anybody know what the capital of, Providence. Providence, yes. Home of the Providence College Friars, which I'm a college basketball fan, so they're my home team. If you ever played the March Madness, every once in a while the Friars will make the tournament. Hasn't been recently, but anyway, so a little bit more about Rhode Island, where I'm from. So I was curious about the name, like where did the name Rhode Island come from? Because it doesn't really make sense. It's probably one of the most unusual state names. Does anybody have any idea where the name come from? Well, I looked it up on Wikipedia last night, so I'm sure this is true. There is apparently an island in Greece by the name of Rhodes. And one of the explorers thought that, so there actually is an island, that's part of Rhode Island, called the Quidnick Island, which is where Newport is, that apparently looks like this island in Greece. So there you go. That's how the name came to be, apparently. It's also the smallest state in the Union. We used to have a phrase when I was growing up. I remember we were called the biggest little state in the Union. So I don't know what that meant, but it's kind of. So in terms of size, 1,000 square miles. That's the size of Rhode Island. And geographically, it's sort of south of Boston between Cape Cod and Connecticut, right? So since we're in California, I just typed in, how big is California compared to Rhode Island? Figured that'd be an appropriate question. San Diego. Anybody have a guess on that one? It's a lot bigger. 158. There's 158 Rhode Islands you could fit in the state of California. So there you go. So the only other thing I can tell you about Rhode Island is it's famous for coffee milk. Okay, if you haven't had that, you should try it sometime. You can actually still buy it in Rhode Island. So anyway, that's a little background on where I came from. So we're going to get into why do we come here? Talk about IBRs, of course. I want to cover some background info, stuff you probably already heard before, but we're going to I want to focus on registration, IBR initiative work plan. So I'll be covering the registration piece, and then Jamie will cover the standards piece, and then we'll have a Q&A. And we do have a Slido. We'll see how hopefully that works. So moving on here. So yeah, a little bit more. So look at this statement. This is no surprise to anyone, basically old news. IBRs, the most significant driver of grid transformation. I just threw this up here because, this is the basis for what was called the NERC IBR strategy, all right, which is summarized nicely on this slide here, all the different components of it. You had risk analysis, so that's event analysis, disturbance reports, alerts, lessons learned, interconnection process improvements with, looking at modeling, for example, best practices, there were reliability guidelines, all kinds of webinars, workshops and stuff that are sort of on a chronology. And then we got the regulatory pieces, which is really kind of what we're here to talk about today, which is NERC standards. And then what's noted there is BES definition review, but that really is talking about registration. All right, so why did we need a strategy to begin with? So I think we're all familiar with the events that have occurred. I'm not going to repeat them all, but I went back and I was doing some research yesterday, and I was kind of surprised how many events there actually have been. I'd kind of forgotten about some of these, and I won't repeat them all. Somebody had mentioned a couple times today the first one. But these are referred to as fault-induced solar PV resource loss events. That was what they were referred to. And there are some reports that have that title on them. But, over the course, since 2016 to 2022, in this part of the world, there's 10 or 11, pretty major events that occurred, which I'm sure you all probably know a lot more about than I do. But then there's also some events that occurred in Texas, and then we have one listed here in Utah. So I'm just bringing this up just in terms of background because it is, there was definitely a common theme, right? We had all these events that were occurring over a period of time, all with, inverter-based resources being impacted. And, what are we going to do about this? Our current CEO, Jim Robb, who was the CEO of WEC, I'm sure a lot of you know him, used to say, we need to stop admiring the problem. So that was kind of a phrase that he used to say a lot. So what is the problem? One of the things that the event analysis team and really the IRPS, so the Inverter-Based Resources Performance Subcommittee, I think that's the current term. It had changed its name several times, but that's a subcommittee under the RSTC. They were looking at these events in great detail. And one of the things that was discovered is that many of the owners and operators are not required to register, right? So what does that mean? That means that these are non-BES IBRs that were being impacted by these events. So I have a chart here. So anyway, as a result of that, and this was around the 2022 timeframe, this group was contemplating putting in some guidance regarding registration. And, decision was made, okay, let's take that off of their plate and let's form a task force within the ERO. And that's what we did. We formed a task force between NERC and all the regional entities. It was a pretty good sized group. And what was our job, a task force job? To write a white paper, right? So we wrote a white paper. This is one of the charts that was in that. We're started to look at the data. What's going on here? What does the data look like? And the source of this data is EIA, Energy Information Administration. If you've heard of that, there's a form called 860 data. So it's a form that basically all generating resources have to submit. So the basis of the numbers that we're looking at here are any generator 1 megawatt or above or connected at greater than 40 kV. Okay, so the chart is showing conventional resources, like what percentage of resources are bulk electric system. Okay, and then conventional resources, we're talking about, basically your fossil fuel units, your gas, nukes, coal, that type of stuff, non-IBRs basically. So in terms of a capacity basis, and this was over the most recent 5 years at the time, because this was in 2022, what did the population look like? And so this would be under inclusion I2 of the BES definition. So that's generation at greater than 100 kV, greater than 20 MVA for a single unit, or greater than 75 for a plant. Okay, so this is what the numbers were. We're somewhere around 97 to 98% of all generation is considered bulk electric system and therefore would require registration and fall under the NERC standards. And that was a pretty steady number historically. Like I think that was the goal of the BES definition, and it pretty much stayed that way for a long period of time. All right, so then what happened when IBRs came along? So here is a question. So this is the interactive part of the program. We drew this, you know, the after lunch spot, which is the most coveted on the agenda. So we figured let's have a little interaction here. So if you could scan that, and if we can start putting some answers in, we'll give you a few minutes. So the question is, what percent of IBRs are registered? So this would be greater than 100 kV, because this includes an I4, and 75 MVA. Those would be the ones that are registered. Anybody want to throw some guesses in? I do have the answer on the next slide. I'm not seeing them. What's that?
You see the top right.
Okay. Okay.
You've got 67 respondents.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. Learning on the job here. All right, let's see how we're doing. I want to hit. Whoa. Wow. 0 to 50%. Holy moly. Well, I think well, you see the correct answer there in green. Wow. Didn't pull that. Too late, too late. All right, we're gonna end that. All right, thanks for playing along. Yeah, so the number is somewhere around 82, 83%, 84%, somewhere in that range. So that was one of the things that we discovered, and so definitely an issue. So, you know, what do the task force conclude? This slide is attempting to summarize that. Right, and this is not news to anybody in this room. You know, we have seen a significant shift from conventional resources to IBRs, right? Conventional resources, just in terms of total quantities, going down, IBRs are going up, right? That's everybody knows that, right? But the other piece of this is the registration side, right? We're seeing a big gap now develop between those resources that are required to follow NERC standards, and that's a problem. So really the conclusion was IBR growth in its current framework is a BPS reliability risk due to, you know, some of the factors there. These are things we all have heard about before in terms of the performance issues and modeling and et cetera. So the conclusion was, you know, we need to register, and we're, you know, again, not trying to admire the problem, but then we got the FERC order. We were on the verge of publishing that white paper. And just before we got that done, on November 17th, 2022, we get the order from FERC on the registration of IBRs. So we were directed to identify and register unregistered owners and operators of IBRs. And this is the key phrase right here, that in the aggregate materially impact reliability. So it's not like these individual units, it's like an aggregate. The concept is aggregate, and that's important to keep in mind. So we were required to submit a work plan. So thankfully we had the white paper all ready to go. So we submitted that with our work plan. And we're also required to submit updates every 90 days. And we've been doing that. There's also 3 milestones here that are listed, and I'll cover those on the next slide. So put this graphic together for the milestones related to the work plan. We also call them phases. So phase 1 completion of the rules of procedure changes. I'll talk about those in a minute. That's creating the registration criteria. Phase 2 is identify who these GO and GOB candidates are. That was not an easy thing to do. And then phase 3 is what we're in right now, which is the registration process. I want to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so yeah, phase 1, ROP revision. So NERC revised the registry criteria for generator owner and operator by adding a new category that covers the unregistered IBRs. And that can be found in Appendix 5B and also in Appendix 2. And there's also, I'll get to that in a second. So that was completed. FERC approved the changes on June 27th, 2024. And that is now in registration criteria. I'll show you what those look like. You probably have seen these already. So this is the revised generator owner definition. So we just split it up into categories, category 1 and category 2. Category 1 is unchanged. That's what it was before, and that's what we refer to as BES generation. That's category 1 GO. And then number 2 here, category 2, which we call Cat 2, that's the new part. So this is only for non-BES IBRs, right? So category 1 includes all types of fuel, or all types of technologies, but category 2 is just for IBRs. And again, you got that aggregate capacity thing in there, 20 MVA and above at a common point of connection greater than 60 kV. So that is the new criteria. And that was chosen purposely because that brings us up to about 98% in terms of IBRs requiring registration comparable to the BES generation, or the conventional, I should say, conventional generation. So that is the new criteria. Now we have the same, basically the generator owner language is almost identical, except it's for the operator as opposed to the owner, but it's the same framework. And this is what I wanted to mention now. We have the standards project that the definitions have been added to mirror this. Jamie's going to cover that. All right, so phase 2, identification phase. There's a couple components here. One of the challenges we had was to try to find out how to contact these new resources. So we had an ERO request for information that went out to all the registered balancing authorities and transmission owners to help identify where these resources were. So thank you if you participated in that. That was a very successful endeavor. We got a lot of great information out of that. The second piece is, and this was handled on the region level, requests for information sent directly to the identified category 2 generator owner candidates. And that was to make contact with them, collect information, do assessments for registration. There's also some tools and outreach that have been developed. There's some communication resources. I'll share that in a second. We also created a practice guide for ERO staff about, different scenarios on how to evaluate Cat 2s. NERC has had several webinars, and I know the regions have as well. So anyway, that's phase 2, and phase 2 is completed. But here is the results. So the chart that you can see here, this was the most recent one that was shared with FERC back in August. And no surprise, but WEC won the prize on this, right? Yeah. So 282 resources have been identified, over 10,000 MVA. It's kind of it's over 40% in terms of the number of resources. Pretty incredible. So yeah, a lot of work going on here, as you all know. Now, there's just a couple of caveats there. Now, the numbers are changing. We have a new update that's coming out at the end of this month. There have been some declines in the numbers due to a couple things: facilities canceling, or maybe their expected commercial operation date is past May of 2026. So it's not like they're not happening, but they're not going to happen within this time frame. Also identified that some wind turbines are type 1 or type 2, which are not IBR. IBRs for wind turbines are only type 3 and 4, and that is in the IBR definition, so those wouldn't qualify. We also identified, and this is interesting, we identified some that actually are category 1. And so we're in the process of registering them now, which is a good thing. And then there was, there was just some inaccurate data as part of, that's just sort of the way it goes sometimes. So that's the results of phase 2. So as you can see, I guess it's not surprising if you look at those numbers, but that's the breakdown by region. So here's a communications tool. Communications has been a big help. They've done a great job. So there's a quick reference guide on the NERC website. It's got all kinds of links in there to all great information. Excuse me, there was actually a quarterly update that gets published. It says they're expected mid-October, but I heard from Amy that it was published last week. So that is also available, and that comes out quarterly. So I just want to mention that as well. And I have one more slide, and that is the phase 3 process for registration. So I'll just go over this a little bit. So the ERO registration process is occurring now. Regional assessments are being done. And that involves collecting data, system one-line diagrams, interconnection agreements, operating agreements, manufacturing data, all that kind of stuff. The registration groups are reviewing that and making recommendations to NERC. NERC is approving them. This is happening in our cores tool. And it's also important to mention that, the entities are involved in this as well, putting data into cores, and that's very, very important. But as part of the process, we kind of developed a sort of a plan, if you will. So we can't do all these at once, right? We can't register 700 facilities or the owners and operators of 700 facilities all at once. So we came up with a plan. We started in August, so we're doing these in batches. Probably come up with a better word than that, but we're calling it batches. We started in August. So basically all category 2 GEO and GOP entities, whether you're brand new, or if you're an existing entity and you're adding this to your registration, we're going ahead and processing that now. So you're going to get a letter from NERC when the regions, when you work with your regional entity, you're going to get a letter from NERC when it's approved, and you're going to have a future effective date of May 15, 2026, but you're going to get your letter now. But the NCR itself won't be published until May 15th of 2026. And so here's my plug: important for timely coordination with WEC registration, because as we have been talking about, what's the goal? BPS reliability. And so I want to do a shout out to Andrew and Abby from WEC registration sitting over there. They've been doing a lot of great work. They have the lion's share of it out here in WEC, so they have a ton of work to do, and they're doing a great job. And so please work with them and cooperate. We really would appreciate it. So thank you. That's all I have, and I'll pass it to Jamie for standards piece.
All right. Yeah, we still get that post-lunch slump. Something I've always wanted to try is just yell out change places and see what happens. Not really, but there's a small part of my brain that wants to do that. The reason why I say that is because change, especially fast change that gets really chaotic, brings its own host of challenges. It adds a whole lot of angst and anxiety. And so there's a lot of change happening right now. You heard it in several presentations already. There's that old children's book, Who Moved My Compliance Program. Basically, we are going to end up with a vastly different system in 20 years. There'll be a lot of things that are similar. There's going to be a lot of things that are just different flavors of what we're doing now. What we've done with Order 901, and this is really just like one microcosm of the larger performance issues that we've seen with IBR and other aspects. I mean, we're talking about large loads. We're talking about just the changing resource mix and extreme weather. All of these things do impact each other and overlay because everyone within your organizations or within your state or region all have to deal with these all simultaneously, in addition to other state and provincial territory regulation. So it can become a very nested body of work. And so we want to make sure that we meet this balance. I talk a lot about balance because we want to provide everything that you need, all of the information, all of the time, but you can't process that. You can't really actually absorb all of that and then make adjustments. So a lot of the conversations we've been trying to have more is how do we provide very concise, clear messaging, precise and clear messaging on what's needed, not just here's, I'm going to go through 901, here's what the directives are. But what does this mean for you? What do you need to do about it? And that's really more to the point that I want to focus on for this presentation. We've talked about 901 for a couple years. As Steve pointed out, it was a lovely Christmas present we got from FERC in the end of 2023. We started out looking at a lot of crossover with previous projects that we've been doing. This is stuff that had been already identified. While trying to move these projects forward, you know, we've hit somewhat of a process bottleneck within the standards world. I'm sure you're familiar with that. So there's going to be some changes to how we get to standards so we can avoid these like rushed timelines, especially when we're looking at, I think it's up to 12 different standards that have been impacted across, 9 different projects. So it's been a pretty extensive set of work. Taking everything to performance. We're taking snapshots of what an older system used to look like. We used to do planning based off of these older capacity models that could be updated once a year, and that would be okay. It would be sufficient for what was needed. But now, as we're seeing such disparity between the operational realm and the planning realm that the models don't even match, what does that mean? And what are we actually assessing and evaluating? We're not even looking at the same models. So this is really why I think Steve mentioned earlier today in his opening, there's the what and then there's the why. The reason why this is so important is because if we aren't planning with the same data that's in the field and actually in operations, then we are setting ourselves up for question mark. And that's very, very concerning. So 901 is intended to address just this. 4 milestones over the 3 years that we had this plan. We filed our work plan in January of 2024. Last year, we hit milestone 2, which was related to data sharing, writing through, making sure IBR were able to just, I think momentary cessation was brought up earlier, ensuring that when there was a voltage or frequency disturbance that the generators were acting intentionally. A lot of controllers were set up to just operate the way the vendor had interpreted regulation to be. So they just stopped injecting current at certain periods, even though no one asked them to do that. There was other situations as well where they were not tuned correctly at all. Working this year, great news, basically celebrated this weekend. We had the last of the milestone 3 projects pass. Just huge shout out to anyone who engaged with us directly, working with the drafting team, working with the developers who are trying to do those one-on-one calls. We can't call everyone all the time for every project, but a lot of the questions that we get or responses that we get don't often include the detail as to why this thing is important. There'll be a lot of statements to say, we'd rather it say this, but not what the impact is or why we need it to be a certain way. And when we're operating in a crunch timeline, that can be challenging. We might miss some details or miss some opportunities for other options. So we had a lot of that really packed into the back end for milestone 3, but really, really pleased with where we've landed on that. For milestone 4, we're getting better at these confluence of several projects all working together. Those projects as well, we'll kind of go through in a little bit more detail. So milestone 2, again, not going to go into all the details of what all these projects were, but we have some new standards. Rather than try to just force fit IBR into the current protection and suite of standards, it's stood to reason that because these operate so differently with fast acting controllers, they don't have governors and like a spinning turbine. Maybe we should treat these just a little bit separately to make sure that we're not just combining M&Ms and Skittles in the same bowl and serving it to our guests. Great Halloween prank, by the way. What we've done is started a new PRC 28, 29, and 30 focused on getting that data sharing installed at sites. A lot of the legacy generation issues that was brought up earlier was probably where a lot of our focus is. How do we not just retrofit some of these units, but make sure that we're even getting the data from them? So if nothing else, Out of milestone 2, I pointed PRC 28 as the should have been started on this last year. There is a small number of people who are going to be able to provide this particular type of equipment unless you'll be able to do that type of testing and installation and making sure that you're going to be able to have that installed for your facilities, all your IBR, including Cat 2, which this is our first instance of bringing in the Category 2 generation, by the deadlines imposed by FERC in the implementation guidance or implementation plan of this project. There is some caveats in there for things outside your control. You don't build this machinery. A lot of this stuff is coming from overseas. We want to be diligent about supply chain concerns and making sure that we're not just rushing things through that haven't been vetted. So there's going to be some compliance capability to if you can demonstrate good faith behavior, looking to get that installed, that PRC 28 still has some room for compliance, even past that effective date and compliance date. But look into that, talk to WEC. They've got some information on how to proceed with that and communicating that. For PRC 29 and PRC 30, you have to set criteria for writing through. You have to then analyze it. So get the data, here's the criteria, analyze. I do want to mention PRC 29 in just a little bit more detail right now because we did receive a lot of lessons learned coming out of last year. For those who follow our process, last year was the first instance of our board enacting the special rule 321, which allowed them to somewhat move into an alternate direction of what is our current standards development process. Now, what that meant was that we hit a wall with where we were in the development and our timeline. So we had to use this special process to get around that. Ideally, we should be able to put everything through the process. We want a consensus building process. I say we shoot for 100 every time. If we hit 85, that's amazing. Can't please all the people all the time, but very much we got to make sure that we're answering questions, and the things that we have left over, we don't just leave on the table. We come back and think about, well, what does this mean for future revisions? PRC 29 was one that had a lot of feedback from folks. Some of the conversation happened late in the game, and also some of the conversation that did come earlier was missing that why piece. So there's still some holdovers from that conversation that is in now Order 909. I point this out because we have a virtual workshop scheduled for November 5th. We're going to be talking about the issues that were left over. If you haven't received that registration, if you're looking to attend that, we'll have an agenda going out, I believe either today or tomorrow, to discuss those issues. Long lead times for projects. I'm not sure how many entities in this room might be impacted by this like offshore wind facilities with the specific DC chopper issue, which there's a potential for some conversation there. What's reasonable, what makes sense, all of that conversation we're going to be having at our upcoming workshop. Milestone 3, we focused on changes to modeling. We had a lot of issues where data wasn't being provided to where it needed to go. People weren't using the same validated data that they were using in operations or planning, and we had these different model sets. One of the key things, again, with 901 was performance-based validation. How are we ensuring that the data that's in the model has been vetted, that it's actually operating that way in practice? We didn't have any requirements that required you to do specifically that. So now we do. These particular requirements are broken out to several different projects. There's going to be more to do here as we're talking about impacts to just the greater work of doing modeling and how that impacts studies. And of course, that gets us into milestone 4. Milestone 4 is just kicking off. This is the last piece. So if you think of the IBR, off in its field, getting the data sharing information installed, adhering to right through criteria, analysis is being done on that. It hits the modeling people. They're able to update their models with performance information. It gets distributed to all of the relevant parties, the RCs, the TOPs, the PAPCs as well, making sure everyone's working off of the same set of numbers. How that then translates into these 2 projects, we've already had some feedback on some concerns, some need to clarify. These are in the very initial stages of these projects where we've got the scope out there for comments, and now the teams are reviewing those comments, and we might see some revisions. One of the things I can't emphasize enough is if you are invested in planning and operational studies, how that might impact what models you use and how you either doing a real-time assessment, operational planning assessment, or long-term modeling. If that's a topic of interest for you, then I would very much point to these two projects as something to get invested in. Not necessarily joining a drafting team, but being able to observe, provide comments, just follow a project. We want to make sure that we can provide enough information and get feedback from you on what you need. There's a lot of just a one-way drafting team or NERC presentations to people, but a conversation is more than one person. And we definitely need that feedback to say, we've got 10 things that we can talk about. What are the top 3 things that are of interest to you? What do you need to know tomorrow? And what can we talk about maybe in a couple months when we get these details a little bit more sorted? That type of stuff we're not really collecting right now. And it's something that we want to talk about more to make sure that we're prioritizing your issues as well as being able to adjust the standard in a way without trying to do everything all at once, which can be complicated, add confusion to the message, and of course, just takes more time. So what things can be deferred? What things do we need to expedite? Your feedback is going to be helpful with that. How we do ranking on that is something that is maybe something that we have in the works. We'll be doing more surveys. We're going to be doing more technical workshops. That interactive feedback from industry has been really where we've been able to drill down into the why. I've even mentioned to a couple of people here today, like in that follow-up to 321 action last year, and in the follow-ups here to milestone 3 this year, we saw comments that we thought we understood what it meant. I had a follow-up call with the entity that submitted it, and if they were willing to talk with us just to clarify what they meant, it was just kind of eye-opening. It's like, okay, well, we actually have a couple different ways to address this concern that you have because you presented a solution. And now that we understand what your concern is, we can maybe do something different. Maybe there's just a clarification. EMT models being required for everyone all the time was one of those things. It's like, no, it's on request, it's as needed. Like the need has to be documented and demonstrated before required to be provided. That's just a simple clarification, but was understood by the drafting team, not understood or clear in the documents for mod 26. I can talk about it now since the ballot closed. So it was just really, really interesting conversation. So just we're still looking for some ways that we can adapt how we're communicating, collecting feedback to get to that message because so much gets lost in those details. Okay. Speaking of details, there's a lot of standards that will or will not be moving into category 2 applicability over the next coming years. 901 required us to bring in the modified standards to include Cat 2. So those standards would have to be complied with and applicable, mandatory and enforceable. But that's not all of the standards. So what we did, and this is with our engineering team, was review all of the standards that were associated with GEO and GOP. Looking at those, determining if we don't change anything else in the standard, meaning not just the applicability language, but making sure that if we just started to apply this to GEO GOPs that had Cat 2, that we weren't introducing some compliance gap, or we might be introducing a reliability risk. So we took that into consideration as well as part of a comprehensive analysis. We came out with only 8 other standards besides these PRCs that we determined with the currently active and enforceable standards, we can say when we modify the definition of GEO GOP to include this new category 2, that those would be the only ones right now that we would consider to be applicable. So that can get confusing because that's that 8 there. Then there's the PRC ones here. And then we've got mod 30, the mods coming out this year. in other projects as they're looking to updates, make revisions, consider whether or not we go out with Cat 2. Each one of those changes will go through comment periods with industry as revisions to those projects. There'll be a ballot on that. So there's, again, get questions a lot as to what our plan is to go through all of the standards in, front to back, like which ones are we prioritizing? We're having some of those conversations, but really on just the currently active drafting teams, we're looking to see how we can at least kickstart that conversation, make sure people are at least considering whether or not Cat 2 is appropriate to bring into this particular standard or not. Or if there's any modifications to differences between Cat 1, Cat 2. It's going to get complicated, having a lot of different dates for these projects. We were in this interim period where normally, previously, we would just say we have one effective date and we have one compliance date. Income phased in compliance programs where, okay, we have to have 25% of these by a certain year, 50% by another year, 75% by a third year. Add in the additional complication that, well, we're not going to have anything for Cat 2 be required to be mandatory and enforceable before May 15th of 2026. Didn't want to discourage early registration, so that was the cutoff date. So there's a little bit of transitionary period right here where we have some that will be not before that date, but other generation will be. But following that May 15th date, we'll be looking very much at a consistency of Cat 1, Cat 2 being treated the same within the compliance dates portion of the standards. But rather than you all just jotting this down each time, we've worked on putting together this document. It's part of, I believe Steve mentioned, the IBR registration initiative FAQ. There's a monthly FAQ, and then there's a link to this document. It's not meant to be a source that says we're going to make changes to all of these standards, but it just lists them all. So you have just at an eye glance, this one does not have any data with it, which means you have confirmation that there's no changes to it yet. Not that there will be, but you don't have to worry about that one. As it comes into conversations for like newer entities looking to comply, that can be really important because we want to build up the compliance programs more meaningful, more insightful, more intentional. Some of the larger organizations, it may just make sense to start moving some of these programs over to incorporate Cat 2. We'll leave that to conversations with you and WEC and what makes sense for your organization and your risk tolerance. But when it comes to what's required, this document will be what we maintain to just provide just what do I need to comply with and when, which is a long way of the presentation to break it down to those 2 points, because I know that's what most people want to know coming out of this conversation is just tell me what do I need to do and how do I do it and when's the deadline for this? So this is meant to provide that assurance. It's not a compliance document. It's not a standards document. We're working together with them in legal and registration, ensuring we're all up to date as to what goes into the Align tool and what we're communicating. So I can't help myself but throw in a small plug. I think I said this last time. If you don't know that industry writes the standards, I've got news for you. Our team is, we facilitate this process. We make sure that the process is fair, open, transparent. We want people from different perspectives, different companies who come in like vertically integrated or market entities, small entities, large entities. We need your expertise. I wish we could say that we had 40, 50 nominees for every project that we whittled down to just the top cream of the crop. And I understand, we end up in a situation where we ask for a lot and we provide a lot of information. So it's very challenging to just jump into that process. I think of my own time, like at the utility prior to coming to NERC, SIP 14 version 1 came across our desks. And I remember sitting in a room with the other transmission planners saying, what do we do about this? And how does this work? Flash forward 7 years. I'm like, it's easy. It's so clear. Like the information's right there. You have all of these options. You're flexible because I've been sitting in it for 7 years. And I try to keep that in mind when we're going through like new standards or revisions to standards, is that it's not going to be abundantly clear unless you're dealing with this day in and day out. That's not meant to dissuade you. That's meant to say, we're trying to put more effort into maybe some form of onboarding, maybe some form of shadowing. Whether or not you participate as a team member, it's not just a bunch of people who are new to projects. We'll team you up with seniors who've been on projects before. If you're interested, if you have time, if you just want to observe a couple calls, please do. It's something that you can still participate in even as an observer. Share your opinion. Sometimes observers are even voluntold homework once they make a valid point and the team just says, okay, well, you know, if you don't mind submitting to that, that would be great. Strong standard identifies who, what, when, doesn't get into the why. We're looking more at objective-based standards, objective-based requirements. And of course, making sure that we allow entities, facts, and circumstances to abide. So I couldn't help myself but to make that a small recruiting pitch, but I think at this point, I've got one more question. And so kind of same thing with Slido here. We make a lot of assumptions with data that we get back. And, you know, I can say people just don't have the time or it's not accessible. So I'm interested in what this room's main pressure points are. This is ranked choice. So just select the 4 in order. What is your biggest challenge to your least challenge in getting involved in standards? Oh, it's going to do live results. Interesting. Yeah, it's slowing down, but yeah, got a pretty good pattern here. This is really interesting. I would have, this is my assumption here. I would have thought the process would have been near the top. Excellent. Okay. So this gives me a little bit more idea to talk about with the team, like how can we address maybe these top 2 issues a little bit more, like provide more condensed information, you know, pages and pages and reams of PDF documents. We're trying to do like more videos and things like that. How to get you more information in a shorter amount of time, and see how we can get people to participate with less availability. Okay. Well, that's all that I think we had here. Like we're still got a lot of work to do here with registering and working on standards, but we are absolutely here to take your questions.
Hello, Tim Kelly from SMUD. There we go. I know in the last IBR registration work plan update to FERC, NERC talked about providing percentage of completion of the IBR registrations. Can you talk about what that's looking like right now and across all of the regions?
No. No, I'm kidding. We will be providing an update on that. So we are making good progress. I'd say we probably have about 100 facilities registered so far over the first couple of months, somewhere around there, but it's a work in progress.
All within WEC?
No, across the arrow. But WEC certainly has so we have targets for each region. Certainly WEC has the biggest target because they have the most to get done. So, but they're on target right now. So I think it's looking good. Just stay tuned a little bit. We will be putting those numbers together for the next update, but I don't really have them to share today. So that'll be coming out at the end of the month.
Okay, thank you. And then one last question, regarding when the category 2 GeoGPs become registered, is there any talk about a list, an early list that the BAs and TOPs can see that, yes, in fact, that IBR did register, they're in the process, they're going to have an NCR, they're with it, they've been contacted. Because there are some standards that the BA, TOP, TOs and requirements have to complete prior to May 15th. With the, in conjunction with the GeoGOP, sending them information, data specifications, so forth. I think it would really help to just maybe see, yes, they are registered.
So you're looking for a list of resources in your footprint that are registered for category 2? Is that, I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking for.
Yes,
Okay.
that they have that they
Okay.
actually have completed the registration process or.
Okay. We'll take that back. I'll talk to Wex, see if that's something you'd be interested in doing. But okay, we'll take that back as a question. So don't have an answer for you now, but we'll take that back.
Okay, thank you.
Tim was fast. I was sitting right next to him. He beat me to the mic. But no, so Leland, McMillan, and Nace. So my question is, so I understand, the standards that have been revised or will be revised. That list makes sense to me. The question I have, so PRC 28, disturbance monitoring equipment. So like PRC 2 is only applicable, as identified by transmission or reliability coordinator. So what was the reason for requiring all IBRs to have disturbance monitoring equipment?
When it came to using 901, like the order of 901 was requiring that they all have that capability of providing that fast acting data, essentially addressing the need that people weren't able to do adequate event analysis studies without that data. And so people were getting essentially bounce backs from Geo saying, well, we don't have that, we can't provide that. Was a response that was coming too loud and too often that it necessitated the order to require that equipment be installed.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Kevin Conway, Western Power Pool. And I just want to make a plug for Jamie here as far as getting involved in the standards process. There is no, I monitor a lot of the standards development. And I can't tell you how frustrating it can be when there's 90 people on the phone and 6 talking. And everybody's got to have an opinion, even if it's a supporting opinion. But it is so helpful when people finally chime in and they either support the issue or they give an opinion about maybe a different direction. But participation by logging in is one thing. Participation by actually joining the conversation is a whole nother thing. And I really encourage people to speak up. It's really important to the drafting team. It's important to get a quality standard. And it's important for everybody to get this done efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, just to add in, thank you so much for that. There was one instance, there was a drafting team. There was one member I knew, he was always just completely silent for months and months and months. Got in a room together for an in-person drafting team meeting, and I looked over and he had copious notes going back for like the entirety of the project. So if you want to participate but don't feel comfortable even speaking, talk to the developers. Maybe you can provide those notes as well, because it's an excellent point. Like we want that information. We want your thoughts. We can't read minds, and we very much want to be able to make sure we're incorporating all of that information. Any online?
We have time for an online, or we've got another in person. Go ahead.
Hi, Chris Chavez from Arrivon Energy. So another region, we just registered some facilities in another region. And the whole COD, register on COD, and everybody's in lockstep with that now. We were told that when we give our information and register, NERC will process the information and they will date it, our registration, the day they process it. And so we're kind of like, well, okay, if we hit COD at a certain date and we have a registration date of another date, we have some dates there that are not accounted for. So is that true? Is that what we're going to be having to do here in WEC as well?
Well, yeah, that's not related to this topic, but yeah, that's a legal question. So in terms of the effective date of registration, per the rules of procedure, what our legal department has told us is when the notification occurs. So that's our current policy. So yes,
So they're not going to be backdated to the
Correct.
COD date?
correct.
Okay.
That's why we want to process things as soon as we can. So get the information in early. It doesn't help us if we find out after the fact. So get it in early, and we want to process that as soon as we possibly can when you know COD is. So if you know it's going to be on Friday, let us know, and we'll get the paperwork going so we can notify you as soon as possible. So that's the key thing here. So we
And we
can't,
do-
I mean, the old framework was, oh, let us know, and then we'll backdate it to whenever the backdating is. We can't do that anymore. You know, that's our legal advice. So with that in mind, I think advance notice and working timely is much more important so that we don't have a gap that you're talking about, so that we can process the registration as close to commercial operations as possible.
We'll start with our online questions. We have just a couple moments. Do you know when the workshop will be scheduled for the Milestone 4 project?
Yes, not announced. So you're hearing it here for the first time. The first week of December is what we're shooting for. We're locking down the location, so that might change. There has not been an announcement set out, but we're looking at, I believe, the 4th and 5th of December.
Here first. Thanks, Jamie. When you mentioned event analysis for IBRs, is it specifically for real-time operations or system behavior seen on Mod 33?
A little bit of a combination of both. So if you're doing well, not so much real-time analysis because you're not doing the retroactive look. So event analysis being just a retroactive evaluation of what occurred during the events, how the units responded. If you had like the typical governors, like what was the point of nadir and what was their frequency response time, and like being able to map that out and determine, did they have some protection controller issues or something else? So, and how many units were involved in exacerbating the conditions of that event? We have an event analysis program at NERC, so I'm very thinking of it in that context. But when it comes to Mod 33 as well, they're looking at a system-wide validation. So it's not completely different. They're looking at a particular event that occurred and then doing a validation based off of that event for the larger system. So one's doing more root cause analysis, the other one's seeking to validate the model. But it's kind of the same analysis.
Thank you. That's all we have time for. If you had an online question, we'll forward those to Jamie and Steve. So thank you.